Hello and happy new year to everyone listening. This is a new episode of the Heavy Business Podcast, formerly known as the C Squared Podcast. So if you're in your platform and you're seeing a different title for the podcast, that's because we've chosen to change the name of the podcast, but it is still the same podcast as before. And I'm going to let Curtis go into a little bit of what's changing and why. And then, we'll kind of go back and forth and talk about why this is happening and what to expect.
Sure. So basically 2 or 3 months ago, Aliyah came to me and Corinne, and she said she wanted to revamp the podcast a little bit to focus more on the business end of things, because we have been branching out a little bit into other things, just so that way we can be a little bit more focused. And we both thought it was a great idea that we should have one thing as our main topic. So we chose business, and Aliyah decided to do a little survey of past guests and various other people and asked them what they thought would be an appropriate name for the podcast. And the name they came up with is
Heavy Business.
Yes. So we're going to be mainly focused on that. We have interviewed past guests before, like musicians, and not talked about the business end of things. But from now on, we are going to primarily be focused on that. We may have another guest, the odd guest, come on that's might not just be talking business, because, like, for example, if we ended up giving someone like Chris from Under Oath again, we'd probably bring him back just because he has a lot of experience, and he might not just talk about business, for example, but might want to talk about his music, just as an example. The main thing is going to be the business end of things. So the other thing too is Aliyah is going to be the prime person on the podcast now. She's considered to be the podcast host. I am the co-host. The reason being is because the main reason being is that she likes doing it. She puts a lot of time and effort into doing it. She researches the guests thoroughly. She's basically been running it behind the scenes anyways, so we've decided to give it to her. Corey's going to come on every once in a while too, but we both figured that since Aliyah wants to do this, why not? She can co-host it with one of us. It's probably going to be mainly me, but Corey will do the odd one every once in a while. And yeah, what do you got to say about that, Aliyah, before I go into anything else with it?
Mainly just that the other element to that is that you and Corinne both have other huge responsibilities within the company of C Squared. And I haven't been really focused so much on running PR campaigns. And so this is basically all that I'm doing for C Squared is the podcast now. So I'm able to commit a little bit more time to hosting and to making this podcast everything that it can be, hopefully.
Yeah, and the other thing too, just as an aside to that, is a lot of times me and Corey would be rushing around trying to get information about our guests or trying to get questions ahead of time. And Aliyah can just now do that because that's basically her full-time job at C Squared, quote unquote. And then we can focus on the PR end of things and marketing end of things that we do. And she can just get all that prepared, like she already was anyways, so why not just give her the title of being podcast person? Also, one thing I do want to point out as well is if you have any questions about the podcast, or if you want to get a guest on, a specific guest, Aliyah is your person that you want to talk to on it now. I have been having people reach out to me direct. I keep sending them over to Aliyah. Aliyah's email is aliyah@csquared.info if you want to have a specific guest on. Even if you just have someone that you would like us to have on that you don't personally know, just drop the name, maybe say why they would be a good fit for the podcast.
Yeah, like what topic you would want us to talk about. It would be great to just have that as a jumping off point.
But with specifics, right? So not just like they would make a good guess, which is something that always drives me nuts. But but some of the things that we're going to be bringing up on the business end of things are going to be things like marketing. I think Aliyah wanted to talk about advertising at some point. I know she wants us to talk to some A&R people. We actually have an A&R person lined up to come on this year. Well, in the next month or other, not this year. PR people, she wants to speak with other PR people in the industry, because it's always good to find out what our quote unquote competitors are doing too, and how they do things as well. Who else? What other type of guests we want to have, Aliyah?
I just want to say that I guess we're refocusing the mission, and our mission has always been kind of to get the tools and information to you, the listener, to help you get your music heard. And I know from a personal perspective how difficult it is to, you're creating your music and you're managing your band and you're making your social media content and you're booking your shows and. So what we want to do is get you all of the best information from industry professionals. And I'm going to be learning along with you guys. So yeah, I'm really excited to continue the podcast. Like I said, it's going to be very similar to the podcast that you've come to know over the last year and a half, 2 years. And it's just a slightly more focused direction.
Now,
and a new name.
Now, I just want to be clear on one thing, because we kind of said it, but just not to gloss over it. It is still a C Squared podcast. It is just, we are pretty much just dividing it up into a different part of the company versus having it being lumped in as it, because like I said before,
and also, can I just say, the other reason we're changing the name is just for searchability. And you guys, listeners, we've given you we've said a lot of times to make sure that your name is searchable, like your band name.
Not. Yeah.
And our previous podcast name was not searchable. And so this is a more searchable name. It describes what we're talking about on the podcast. And so in that regard, I feel like it's a step in the right direction in practicing what we preach.
I agree. And some of the things that aren't going to change is we're still going to be having on a couple co-hosts. We have Kevin Stewart Panko coming on monthly. Ian Cheney's coming on monthly still as well, or bi-monthly. I think, I can't remember off the top of my head. Holly's going to be occasionally still co-hosting as well. I think I said Corinne is going to be co-hosting still occasionally as well. I'm not sure if I said that. Yeah, so I mean, otherwise it's basically the same thing that you've been listening to for the past year. Well, same format rather, just narrowed down and focused. Name has changed. No one is upset with anyone. No one is branching off or anything like that. This is still C Squared. Just want to be clear, because I know when the Dumb and Dumbest podcast was redone, there was numerous questions about it. So it's like, no, in this case, still the same company, still the same thing, just we're branching out a little bit, so that way it's easier to search. And Aliyah is now the in charge on it, instead of just having Curtis and Corey sometimes doing it with her. So anything else do we want to cover on this, Aliyah?
I think that about covers it, but everyone listening, I would love to hear your feedback on topics that you feel like we should cover, guests you think we should have, and what you want to learn from them. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask myself or Curtis. We're happy to answer any questions. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else about the change that we need to say. Can you think of anything?
The only other thing I can think of is just make sure that if you do have a guest that you want to have on specifically, make sure you say, because we can usually get them if we're asked to. Obviously, we can't get James Hetfield. I don't think. I mean, if we can, that'd be great.
Oh man, manifesting. It's 2023.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm big into the manifesting, as you know. I don't think we can get James Hetfield. So if you can think of pretty much anyone outside of that, let us know. We'll do our best to get them. We do have some big guests lined up for this year. Aliyah has already gotten, I think, the first 2 months booked almost, I think. So no, okay. First month, I think.
Not the first 2 months, but
it seems like we got a lot.
Month, yeah.
So she's already got some good guests lined up. So if you can think of anybody, just hit us up, because we're always on the lookout for more guests. But again, it's got to be focused on the business end of things, something that'd be interesting to everyone, not just some band that just started out or anything like that.
And keep in mind, we are still going to interview musicians. It's just that when we interview those musicians, there will be at least a segment of the interview that's focused on promotion or lessons that other bands can take away from that band. So if you're in a band and you want to come on the podcast, absolutely still reach out to us and let us know what you can contribute to the conversation. Yeah.
And I just want to say one more thing, Aliyah, which is I do want to say thank you to everyone that has listened for the past 2 years that we've been doing this, or year and a half, whatever it's been. We do appreciate you listening. We actually get a lot of people that refer other people to the podcast, which is really, really nice. Every time I go out to a show, almost every time someone asks me about the podcast, they've learned something, which is really, really cool. So again, thank you for listening. And on top of that, make sure you also subscribe.
Or
Because
follow us on on the platform. I think it's following on Spotify.
I think so too.
Or subscribe.
But
and
yeah,
recommend us to your friends.
Recommend us. Make sure you subscribe. That's the key thing I wanted to say. And if there's any type of changes you want to see or anything you want added, just let us know. We do listen to feedback. We don't always do what we're asked to do, but we do listen to feedback and we do take it into consideration. And I think that's all I got.
Yep. So that sums up the changes that are happening. And also, as I said, please let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, looking forward to rocking 2023 with all of y'all, and have a great one. Thanks for listening. And until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.